The boarding gate was chaos, rolling suitcases, murmurs of tired travelers, and the constant announcement drone that made even a first-class cabin feel far away. Claire Dawson stood still amid the noise, her expression calm, her eyes hidden behind sleek sunglasses that could have doubled as armor. To the world, she was the woman who never faltered, the CEO who turned a struggling software company into a tech empire within 4 years. To herself, in that moment, she was just tired. 2 nights without real sleep, 3 countries in 48 hours, and a calendar full of investor calls that didn't care about jet lag. She had declined the private jet, this time said she wanted to feel normal, for once. The truth, she wanted to disappear among strangers. The flight attendant scanned her ticket and gestured politely. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Dawson. Seat 14A. She nodded, forced a smile, and stepped down the narrow aisle. The hum of engines, the faint scent of coffee and cologne oddly comforting. She noticed people glance at her, not because they recognized her but because of how she carried herself. Structured blazer, minimalist jewelry, posture like she owned the sky. She didn't mean to stand out, she simply didn't know how not to. Her seat was by the window. The aisle seat beside it was already occupied a man in his early 30s, wearing a casual plaid shirt and jeans, reading a worn children's book with quiet focus. His hair was slightly messy, the kind of unstyled look that somehow suited him. Next to his feet sat a small pink backpack with a cartoon bunny keychain. He looked up when she approached. His smile was warm, open, disarming. "Looks like we're neighbors for the next 7 hours," he said. Claire nodded politely, sliding her carry-on under the seat. "Looks that way," she replied. Her tone was neutral but not unkind. Once settled, she pulled out her tablet, tapping through financial projections and quarterly summaries. Numbers always obeyed her, people didn't. Yet for some reason, she couldn't focus. The man beside her read quietly, the rhythm of his page turns oddly soothing. A small voice interrupted. "Daddy?" Claire turned slightly. A little girl with curly blonde hair and big curious eyes peeked from across the aisle. She couldn't have been more than 6. "Can I have my crayons?" she asked. "Sure thing, sweetheart." The man, her father, clearly reached into his backpack and handed them over, his tone gentle and patient. Claire caught herself watching, unexpectedly moved by the simple tenderness in his voice. Once the plane leveled off, the cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow. Claire tried again to focus on her reports, but her mind drifted. She thought of her own father, a businessman too, though he had rarely looked up from his papers long enough to smile at her. Maybe that's where she'd learned it. That success required stillness, control, distance. She glanced sideways. The man had closed his book and was gazing out the window, his expression thoughtful. The faint reflection of clouds painted his features in soft light. Something about him unhurried, grounded, unsettled her in a strangely peaceful way. "Rough day?" he asked suddenly without looking at her. She blinked, caught off guard. "You could say that," she murmured. "Same here," he said with a chuckle, "but at least we're flying toward tomorrow. That's progress." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "That's one way to see it." Minutes passed. The hum of the engines became a lullaby. She told herself she'd just close her eyes for a moment, only until the seatbelt sign turned off. Her head leaned back against the seat. Then, almost unconsciously, it tilted sideways, landing gently on the man's shoulder. He froze for half a second, surprised, but didn't move. The faint scent of her perfumed jasmine and something crisp lingered in the air. Outside the window, the world turned gold as the sun began to set above the clouds. Claire's breathing softened, evened out. In sleep, her face looked different, no armor, no precision. Just a woman who'd been strong for too long. He smiled faintly. "Guess even CEO need rest," he whispered to himself. As the plane carried them into the fading horizon, she slept soundly for the first time in months, her head resting on the shoulder of a stranger, a single dad who had no idea his quiet flight was about to change both their lives. Claire woke to the faint sound of laughter, soft, childlike, close by. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the steady hum of the engines brought her back to reality, the plane, the flight. And the warm firmness under her cheek. Her eyes flew open. She realized to her horror that her head was still resting on the man's shoulder. She sat up abruptly. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she whispered, brushing her hair back, mortified. He turned his head toward her, his eyes amused but kind. "It's fine, you were out cold," he said, chuckling. "Didn't want to wake you. You looked like you needed that nap." Claire's face flushed, a rare sight for someone known in the corporate world as composed and untouchable. Still, that was incredibly unprofessional, she muttered, straightening her blazer. "Relax," he said, still smiling. "No board members here, just strangers on a flight." That made her laugh despite herself, a small, surprised sound that felt foreign. It had been so long since she'd laughed without forcing it. The little girl across the aisle peeked up again. "Daddy, did the lady wake up?" she asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes, she did," the man replied warmly. "And she's probably hungry, like us." The girl grinned at Claire. "Hi, I'm Lily. Daddy says sleeping means your brain is recharging." Claire couldn't help but smile. "Hi, Lily. I guess my brain really needed it. I like your jacket," the girl added with the blunt sincerity only children possess. "Thank you, I like your crayons," Claire said. Lily giggled and went back to coloring, humming softly. The man glanced at her again. "I'm James, by the way. Single dad, software engineer, expert at reheating mac and cheese." "Claire," she said, hesitating only a second. "CEO of Dawson Dynamics." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Ah, that explains the power blazer," she smirked. "And what does that mean?" He leaned back, thoughtful. "You look like someone who's used to being in control of everything all the time." He wasn't wrong, but hearing it from a stranger felt unsettling. "That's not a bad thing," she replied, defensive out of habit. "No, it's not," he said gently. "But it can get heavy, can't it?" For a moment she had no answer. The question hit deeper than she expected. She looked out the window instead, at the endless expanse of clouds, white islands in a sea of blue. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, the flight attendant came by with meals. James ordered something simple for Lily: pasta, and apple juice, and a coffee for himself. Claire waved hers off at first, but Lily insisted she try the chocolate chip cookies. "They're the best part," she said, pushing one toward her. Claire smiled and accepted. "Thank you, partner." As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, surprisingly so. They talked about travel, her endless corporate flights, and his family vacations that never quite happened anymore. He told her about Lily's love for space and her dream of being an astronaut. She told him about her younger brother, who used to build rockets out of soda cans. When she asked, "What about Lily's mom?" the air between them shifted just slightly. "She passed away when Lily was 3, he said simply. "Car accident." Claire's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she murmured. He nodded. "It's okay. It's been a few years. Lily keeps me going." He looked across the aisle and smiled at his daughter, who was now coloring the sky purple. "She sees the world in her own way. It helps me remember to slow down." Claire followed his gaze, something warm stirring in her chest. "You're doing a good job," she said quietly. He turned back to her, eyes soft. "You don't know that, I can tell," she said. "She's happy. Kids don't fake that." The compliment seemed to catch him off guard. "Thank you," he said after a pause. "That means a lot." The captain's voice came over the speakers, announcing turbulence ahead. The plane jolted gently, then steadied. Lily squeaked but giggled nervously. "Hey, it's okay," James reassured her. "Just bumpy clouds." Claire instinctively reached across the aisle, resting her hand over Lily's tiny one. "Your dad's right. Planes are like birds, they just ride the waves." Lily's eyes widened. "Waves in the sky." "Exactly," Claire said, smiling. "Sky waves." The little girl relaxed, holding both their hands, now her father's on one side, Claire's on the other. James watched silently, a small smile forming. For the first time, He saw something in Claire beyond the polished surface, a tenderness she probably hid even from herself. When the turbulence passed, Lily leaned back and closed her eyes, still clutching her crayon. Claire and James shared a quiet glance, one that said more than words could. "Thanks," he said softly, "for that." Claire shrugged, pretending it was nothing, but her heart was unsteady in a way no business deal had ever made it. As the cabin lights dimmed again and the engines hummed steadily, she realized the strangest thing: she didn't want to open her laptop. For once, she wanted to stay right here, in this fleeting, suspended world 30,000 feet above everything she controlled. Somewhere between New York and London, surrounded by strangers and clouds, Claire Dawson, the woman who never let her guard down, began to feel something she'd long forgotten: peace. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, painting the aisle in hues of fading sunset. The steady hum of the engines became a kind of music, a rhythm of calm after the turbulence. Claire leaned back in her seat, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the horizon burned with gold and violet, the world below lost beneath layers of clouds. Lily had fallen asleep across the aisle, her head tilted against the window, the crayon still clasped in her little hand. James tucked a small blanket over her and smiled tenderly before turning back toward Claire. "She's out cold," he said softly. Claire nodded, her voice equally quiet. "She's a beautiful child." "Yeah," he whispered, "she's my whole world." There was something in the way he said it, not just love, but strength and exhaustion woven together. The kind that only comes from someone who's learned to hold everything together, even when life tries to pull it apart. Claire hesitated, then asked, "Is it hard, doing it all alone?" He thought for a moment. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," he admitted, "but also the best. She gives me purpose. Some days I wake up completely drained. Then she runs in, smiling, and suddenly the day's worth facing." Claire looked down at her hands. "That sounds wonderful." Her voice cracked a little on the word. "I don't think I've ever had that." James tilted his head. "No one waiting for you at home." She shook her head slowly. "Just a penthouse full of glass and silence. I used to think success would fill the emptiness, that if I built enough, earned enough, I'd feel whole." She exhaled softly. "Turns out, silence echoes louder the higher you climb." He studied her face for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time you stopped climbing for a bit," he said gently. "You've been looking down from the top for so long, you've forgotten how the world feels when you're in it." She smiled sadly. "You make it sound so easy." "It isn't," he replied, "but it's worth trying." They sat in quiet for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward, it was full, almost alive. The flight attendants moved quietly through the aisles, offering drinks. Claire declined again, but James accepted a cup of coffee. Then something unexpected happened. A sudden beeping sound came from the aisle across. Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked pale, uneasy. Claire noticed immediately. "James," she said, alarmed, "something's wrong." James turned just as Lily gasped for breath, clutching her little chest. Panic flashed across his face. "She has asthma," he said, his voice tight. He fumbled through the small backpack, searching desperately. "Her inhaler, it's gone. It must have fallen during the turbulence." Claire was on her feet instantly. "Check under the seats," she called out, her CEO command voice kicking in, calm, authoritative, focused. She knelt, scanning the floor with trembling hands. "Blue inhaler, right?" "Yes," James said, trying to calm Lily, who was wheezing now, tears filling her eyes. Within seconds, Claire spotted it wedged beneath the opposite seat. She grabbed it, sanitized the mouthpiece with a napkin, and handed it to James, who quickly helped Lily take a puff. Moments later, the child's breathing began to steady. The tension that had gripped the small space slowly dissolved. Claire let out a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. James looked up at her, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "You just saved my little girl." Claire shook her head, her heart pounding. "You saved her. I just found the inhaler." But Lily reached out a small hand, still weak, and smiled faintly. "You're my hero," she whispered before closing her eyes again. Claire froze. Those three simple words hit her harder than any accolade, any award, any billion-dollar deal ever had. Something inside her cracked open, something she didn't even know had been sealed shut. The flight attendants came by, checking if everything was fine. James assured them it was, thanking them softly. Claire sat back in her seat, trembling slightly, overwhelmed by the rush of emotion she couldn't explain. James looked at her again, gratitude and something deeper shining in his eyes. "Not many people would have reacted that fast," he said. "You didn't even think, you just acted." Claire managed a soft smile. "I guess not everything in me is programmed." They both laughed quietly, but beneath that laugh was something unspoken, a connection that had formed in the middle of nowhere, above the clouds, between two people who hadn't been looking for it. As the plane began its descent hours later, dawn painted the world below in shades of gold. Lily was awake again, drawing quietly this time, a picture of three stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. She proudly showed it to Claire. "That's you," she said, pointing at the tallest figure. Claire stared at it, her throat tightening. "It's beautiful," she whispered. When they landed, passengers stood, stretching and gathering their bags. Claire remained seated for a moment, reluctant to break the spell of the journey. James pulled out a napkin, scribbled something on it, and handed it to her. His handwriting was simple, clear. "Some meetings aren't scheduled, they're meant to happen." For the first time in years, Claire Dawson, the woman who could silence a boardroom with a glance, was left speechless. She folded the napkin carefully, tucking it into her blazer pocket like a secret promise. As she walked off the plane, the morning sun catching her face, she realized something extraordinary. Sometimes the most important business isn't done in offices or meetings, it's written in small, unscripted moments. Like falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder and waking up to life again.